Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 14. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being with us here this Monday, Steelers Nation. And Dave, Steelers go 3-0 in the preseason for the first time under Mike Tomlin, first undefeated exhibition season. Super Bowl, perhaps? 3-0, I don't know. But it was a good preseason. Good to go 3-0. Good to get the win, 19-9, odd one over Detroit yesterday. Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing good for like 2 hours sleep. I'm doing really good. Got coffee in me and all like that. First undefeated preseason. I had the stat of the weird yesterday.
You did. Good. You're in my territory.
I know. I'm coming after your job, Alex Kozora.
Back off.
First undefeated preseason for the Steelers since 1997.
Wow.
And they went 5-0 that preseason in 1997. So the entire Kevin Colbert era, no undefeated Steelers teams during the preseason. And, you know, as you stated, obviously first one for Mike Tomlin. Now, not that undefeated preseasons matter unless you're John Harbaugh, I guess. He likes definitely winning during the preseason there. But yeah, look, you probably wanted to see that football get put in the end zone a few more times than settling for field goals. I have a weird feeling. It was a little microcosm of what we might see, unfortunately, throughout the season is, you know, move the football, not be able to cash it in, kick a field goal, rely on your defense. I mean, everything, quite honestly, a lot of things that happened in that game for a preseason game seemed to be a little more of a glimpse of what we've been talking about and how the Steelers are probably going to have to win a large number of their games if they're going to win, you know, a large number of games in 2022. So a lot to talk about here. Quarterback play, you know, throughout the preseason, I thought, for the most part, was well above the line. No interceptions, right, for any of the quarterbacks during the preseason there. And now this team, you know, unfortunately, there were some injuries to go along with it, so we've got a lot to get to. And happy Monday.
By the way, in 1997, Pittsburgh finished the year 11-5, first in the old AFC Central, lost in the AFC title game to Denver. So let's hope for a first place season coming off their next undefeated preseason. But you're right, Dave. I think big picture, you summed it up well yesterday, kind of a microcosm of the season, an offense that, you know, will need some chunk plays, that needs to do a better job in the red zone, that will rely on its kicker quite a bit, certainly rely on its defense to keep the score down. They were pitching a shutout at halftime, and that's their blueprint. Low scoring, slugfests, get some turnovers, you know, hopefully finish off red zone drives better. That's essentially what we're expecting this season to look like, at least at the start.
Yeah, look, I think red zone percentage and, you know, that kind of stuff is going to, you know, I mean, it goes without saying, you know, you get in the red zone, you better score. But it just really feels like this offense this year, especially with this offensive line, every trip into the red zone that ends in a touchdown seems like it might be a huge victory for the offense overall there. So more questions about the offense, I think, and with good reason, than the defense at this point. But, you know, thanks to at least one key injury that happened in this preseason finale against the Lions, a little bit of a question about the defense now, I think.
Sure. Do you want to talk about the injuries to start, or do you want to go through things position group by position group?
Yeah, let's get the injuries out of the way first, and who played and who didn't play, and those kind of things.
Okay, yeah, the big in-game. Well, there were 3 in-game injuries that were notable. One seems long-term, but two headline names not finishing the game or their allotted snaps, and T.J. Watt with the knee and Deontay Johnson with the shoulder. Mike Tomlin saying after the game, both those injuries appear to be minor, not considered serious, and had it been, say, a regular season game, those guys may have been able to re-enter the game. So Watt and Johnson, bit of a scare there, but those guys should be good to go. The serious injury is Demonte Casey, the veteran safety, having a nice camp, providing really quality depth in Pittsburgh. Again, working that 3 safety package. He suffered a serious-looking left wrist injury. Appears that it was in an air cast after he was on the sideline. Probably means he broke it. And according to Jerry Dulac, although I think it was pretty obvious in the moment, Casey is headed to IR. The only question is, as you brought up last night, will he be on the initial 53 in order to potentially return later this year, or will he go straight to IR and be out the rest of the season? But Casey, certainly a blow to this defense in terms of the depth, in terms of some of the extra packages and different looks, big nickel type stuff. And that's really unfortunate for him because he was having a good summer.
Man, good summer. It just doesn't, that's not a good enough adjective. I don't think. You want to talk about a guy that looked like the Steelers really got a steal on. I think it was you that first preseason game did, highlighted his tackling and those kind of things. And the big nickel package and all like that. I mean, it looked like there were really some plans to really kind of use Casey as this kind of chess piece, if you will, that would have allowed you to do multiple things in the back end there, sliding Minka down. I mean, Casey can play both safety spots, I think, and even play in the slot. I mean, you want to talk about a dime backer, if you will, really, really a key loss there. And, obviously you wouldn't pick any guy to get injured, but one guy that I think if I would have told you, man, you're going to go in this preseason game and you're definitely going to lose Casey for a while, you would, you might not have dinner or something like that, because he's been that important, or looked to be that important of a piece to this defense. He even played on special teams, man. I mean, he was getting burned in the first, before suffering that injury on special teams and doing some things there as well too. I think he even had the opening kickoff tackle too.
He did. Yeah.
On top of it there. So huge blow. And you want to talk about, instant kind of how is this going to affect the initial setting of the 53-man roster? That comes into this as well too, because as you stated, if this is an injury that they think they can get him back, I don't know, week 10, 11, 12 by then you're going to want to have him on your initial 53 so you can move him to IR and then potentially use a designated to return designation on him, once he is able to return. Now, if you think, well, he's going to miss 17 weeks, then obviously you would just ship him right to IR, and then that way you don't have to hold a 53-man roster spot. And I'm not a doctor, and I don't think Dr. Mel has really been able to look at things too closely yet, but I'm going to venture a guess that this is at least some sort of injury. And here's the other thing: you still got 13 days before the season starts, so maybe he can hurry up and get in there, get surgery as soon as swelling or whatever needs to happen for him to have it, and then that recovery process get underway sooner rather than later here. So I'm betting on him being on the initial 53 and then getting moved to IR. But, once again, I guess it depends on the prognosis. If there's, ligament, a lot of things that we just don't know that we would be guessing here. But a huge, huge blow. And then the other aspect, thankfully, it doesn't sound like the Watt and Deontay Johnson injuries are serious here.
Yeah, so luckily nothing. I mean, the Watt, there's gonna be some controversy and discussion. I know Cam Hayward talking about the low block that Lions tight end TJ Hawkinson, I believe, had on Watt there that caused the injury. It's a legal play. There's a debate about should it remain legal or not. I didn't personally have a problem with the actual block, and I'm just glad that TJ Watt's going to be okay.
Right. There was a scary moment there, but I felt okay because he came back onto the field and then left and went to the locker room, I think, after playing a handful more of snaps there. But once again, you got 13 days until the season starts. Maybe that's a good byproduct of this going to 3 preseason games and, having this a little bit of extra time, before the season starts here. But, other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln?
Did you have an issue with how much Tomlin played the starters in this one? I know hindsight can be 20/20, but Tomlin basically playing starters both sides of the ball for the entire first half. It's
always okay unless you get somebody hurt.
Right. The crystal ball works heavily in that one.
Yeah. I got to admit, after TJ Watt made that first play behind the line of scrimmage there, I'd seen enough. But I mean, I guess I understand you want to kind of, and what did Mike Tomlin say? You can't box without sparring first or something like that to the Lions. And we know Mike Tomlin for the most part doesn't live in his fears aspect. And did you really have to play Watt that many snaps though, I guess?
Right.
And, obviously we had a good long discussion about Najee Harris and all like that, who, by the way, Najee, coming out after the fact saying that it was a Liz Frank, sprain, I guess, of some sort that he was working himself through after the fact there. I don't know how much Mike Tomlin will enjoy him letting that info out, but how many snaps did Watt play overall here? I'm looking this up real quick. Watt played 21 snaps in this game.
And he would have played more had he not been hurt.
Yeah, that's probably, I don't know, 17 more than he needed to play. Najee played 28 snaps in this game. You were living in your fears quite a bit there, weren't you?
Yeah, my thoughts. I would have played him one snap, turned him around, put him back on the sideline. I understand he wanted to play. He talked about the rust that he felt like he was knocking off, was not too happy with his performance overall, but just too many snaps. I thought play a little bit, these starters, that's fine. Maybe a quarter. Beyond that, I was kind of ready to get those guys out of there. I understand they're not living in your fears kind of thing, but these guys, it's not like TJ Watt hadn't played this preseason. I mean, they, got snaps the last game. So it kind of felt like that was more the tune-up game overall. And I remember Cam Hayward, I believe this offseason on the Pat McAfee show, talking about sometimes the best team is just the one that stays the most healthy, just winning that war of attrition, and you don't want to put yourself behind. I understand injuries are unavoidable, sometimes inevitable. You can't, dance around them, but I was content with those starters leaving earlier than they did.
Right. And I was okay with like I said, had it in the podcast with Najee and all like that. And, I was okay with Watt seeing the field. I just 20-something snaps I could have done without, I think, for both those players. But, I mean, we can sit here and talk about it and criticize it all until we're blue in the face. Nothing we say or write or do is going to change. I mean, that's what Mike Tomlin decided to do, and he did it. And the backlash, of course, will be, Watt wouldn't have got dinged up, had you not put him out there. And, the whole risk reward thing, I guess, overall.
Right. And the injuries seem minor. So ultimately, it's an outcome-based decision. And the fact they are minor means that there won't be much more talk about that. And so we'll end that conversation about Tomlin playing the starter. Should mention rookie undrafted free agent corner Carlin Platel seemed to get injured late in that game on one of the final snaps. According to the Trib, he was on crutches after the game. So that could be an IR for Carlin Platel. So just a quick note there, a guy fighting hard for a practice squad spot. Really unfortunate to see him get hurt on one of the literal last snaps of the summer.
Yeah, he will be waived injured, and then revert to IR more than likely that way, and then we'll have to see if an injury settlement comes out of that there. So unless anybody else is dinged up, now not playing in this game. What's up with Chase Claypool? What's eating Chase Claypool right now?
I don't know. It's hopefully not that shoulder injury. It's been a bumpy summer for him. He's been in and out of the lineup with that shoulder. At least I think he said it was 2 injuries. He had first hurt the right shoulder early in camp and then came back and then got hurt again. I don't know exactly what that was, and I don't know exactly what kept him out of yesterday's game.
All right, not playing for the Steelers against the Lions. Chase Claypool, Calvin Austin III, Marcus Allen, Miles Killebrew, Arthur Millette, Derek Watt, Alex Highsmith, Montravius Adams, Ryan McCollum, William Dunkel, for the William Dunkel fans out there, Joe Haig, and Isaiah Loudermilk. Now, Loudermilk played 5 defensive snaps in that previous game. Austin was ruled out by Mike Tomlin ahead of the game. I guess the question becomes now with Austin is how serious is that foot injury? Is it a Liz Frank kind of injury the way Najee had? Will Calvin Austin have to go to IR, or can he just be inactive for the first couple of weeks and then go that way with him? Marcus Allen did not see any playing time during the preseason with a serious hamstring injury. Miles Killebrew, no preseason time for him. I'm guessing that's still pectoral related with him. Going to be interesting to see if that's, do they want him? B, if they want him, are they going to manipulate him to IR? So that's another big question there. Arthur Millette with the hamstring that's been bothering him. Derek Watt never saw any preseason action with a shoulder injury. Highsmith, no preseason action with a rib injury. Montravius Adams, no preseason with an ankle injury. Another huge question mark about whether or not he needs to go to IR or not. Haig, I'm guessing that's still concussion related, hoping that he'll be ready by week 1. And then Loudermilk, I guess that's rib related too, maybe aggravated something in that last game. Hopefully it's not serious enough where he has to go IR. So the big questions here is roster manipulation. And is Marcus Allen, and we had this discussion in the direct messages, was it late last night or early this morning or both?
Burning the midnight oil talking about Marcus Allen's hamstring.
Is he healthy? And because this is a guy that is if you cut him, you're going to have to waive him. Right. And is he healthy enough to be cut? Or do they say to heck with you? We're waiving you as injured. If you want to file a grievance, file a grievance. We hope you clear waivers, and maybe we can work either back to the practice squad or to the 53 after the manipulation takes place there. Killebrew, don't really know, what needs to happen there. Montravius Adams is another one there. So the 53 is pretty, I think, easy to put together if you didn't have, if you didn't, injuries, right? These injuries to know how they need to kind of manipulate the roster. And then Marcus Allen's kind of that question mark in there is, yeah, you'd like to have him on special teams, but do you really want him on, $2.54 million on special teams with a hamstring injury, coming off of a hamstring injury on top of it there. So all of your minor roster setting initial 53 questions mostly involve, a question about Marcus Allen, and then how to get some of these guys to IR if indeed it's more than 1 or 2.
Right. The list of names you mentioned of guys who have not played this preseason, have dealt with injuries, is uncomfortably long. I don't think most of those are not incredibly serious, and I think Pittsburgh obviously going to proceed with caution during the preseason with some of these names, but you would have loved to see Montravius Adams play some, and Alex Highsmith, Loudermilk getting back, et cetera. Really surprised that Marcus Allen did not play yesterday. I know that at the end of camp, he was back working an individual, and that was more than 2 weeks ago. He was running around. He looked good. They said he was practicing more this past week. Apparently, he was in Pat's pregame. So it feels like he's really, really close. Another 2 weeks should get him ready for week 1 against the Bengals. But to my point, in trying to construct this roster, manipulate things initially, the initial 53 at Tuesday at 4 p.m. always looks a bit weird and wonky. To me, that's a guy that you could waive healthy. I think he would clear. No one's going to claim a 26-year-old backup linebacker, $2.5 million who's not played this summer, and then bring him back on a reduced salary for half that number, roughly. That seems to be a pretty sound strategy to me.
All right. Where's my tinfoil hat here? He supposedly even dressed yesterday and went through warm-ups and all, is my understanding. Marcus Allen.
Right.
Is this a situation where, all right, he looks healthy, we don't want him to aggravate it, get yourself out of uniform before you trip over something, and because our plan is to waive you and we don't want you to re-aggravate that hamstring injury and have to revert back or anything along those lines on that $2.54 million salary?
Potentially. This team is always, I've always said hamstring injuries take about 2 weeks longer than you think to recover. Guys will look good and they'll run around, but they won't go back 100% full until 2 weeks after that fact. Roughly, I'm just kind of guesstimating some numbers there. So maybe he missed too much practice time. He's not an old guy, but he's not, it just feels like maybe he missed a bit too much time. And perhaps there was that thought of, let's not risk him re-aggravating that when he's not maybe 100%. He's 98% back. And we can maybe yo-yo him on the roster this week.
Marcus Allen's biggest help to this team potentially is blank.
Him being the up back, him being a special teams guy that can help out there.
Because it's not on defense, right?
Right.
So, especially if you're needing a roster spot, that certainly seems to be and 2.54. Now, I guess you could say, well, Miles Boykin is kind of the offensive version of Marcus Allen. However, Miles Boykin can give you something on offense more so than Marcus Allen can give you on defense.
And to me, there's a much higher chance, because Boykin would have to go through waivers as well. There's a much higher chance Boykin would get claimed than Marcus Allen based on the tape that Boykin's put out there this summer.
And plus, that's true as well too. So, okay, we have gone through the do not plays, the injuries. Before we get into, I guess, 53-man roster, initial 53, real quick, a lot of people saying, well, just send Calvin Austin to the PUP. And look, nobody on this roster is eligible for PUP, period, end of story. And we make sure to highlight that before, once training camp gets underway. For a player to be eligible for the reserve PUP list, he must have been on the active PUP list. And the only way you can be on that active PUP list is if you're placed on it before you even practice. Once you practice and let's say you start off, because the Steelers obviously had Tyson Alualu on the active PUP list to start training camp off as kind of a precautionary move. Once he had he stayed on active PUP all throughout this entire time, he would be eligible to go to reserve PUP. He obviously was removed about 10, 12 days or whatever it was, maybe even a shorter time than that, into training camp there. Once he came off that active PUP list, talking about Tyson Alualu, he was no longer eligible for the reserve PUP list. No other players started off training camp on the active PUP list other than Tyson Alualu, so none of them are eligible for the reserve PUP list. So get PUP out of your mind, listeners, okay? Because nobody is eligible for that. The only manipulation with Austin is you either keep him on the 53 he's going to make the initial 53. It's just a matter of whether or not he goes to IR once the initial 53-man roster is set there. I mean, that's end of story there. And it's the same with everybody else that's injured at this point. Either you want them to be a designated to return player, and the only way you can get them to be a designated to return player is to have them on this initial 53 on Tuesday at 4:00, and then move them from that 53 to the injured reserve list. And also the rules this year is 8 players in total, I think, can return as, from the injured reserve as designated to return players. So have I got all the housekeeping out of the way of the do's and don'ts?
I think so, yeah. PUP is OUT out. Not going to have an option there. And yeah, players can even come back off of IR twice this year, but that does count as 2 of the 8 slots potentially there. So that's some of the new nuanced rules of the 2 return rules. Okay.
On to the game.
All right, yeah, let's talk about the game again. Pittsburgh winning this one 19-9 over the Detroit Lions. Pittsburgh going 3-0 on the preseason. We'll go through things position group by position group, starting with the quarterbacks. So Mitch Trubisky, to me, very much cemented his spot as this team's starting quarterback week 1 against the Cincinnati Bengals. I thought that was pretty much a foregone conclusion going into this game. The only scenario I outlined in which Kenny Pickett could threaten to be the starter is if Trubisky really tanked this game and Pickett shined. Pickett was fine. We'll talk about him shortly, but Trubisky really solid, maybe his best game in the preseason so far, pushing the ball vertically. Obviously, you want to see them finish drives off better, so that is maybe one overall offensive negative, but I thought Trubisky was sharp. And again, the deep ball accuracy, the 2-minute drill that he led, really good half for Mitch Trubisky.
He really needed that. He was one of my 8 players to watch in this game. And with the main thing being, I want to see his best performance of the preseason. And I feel we got that out of him there. And 15 of 19, 160 yards, 1 TD, and a nice deep ball down the left side early to Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson. A couple other nice passes of the game. I thought 3 really nice passes during that 2-minute drill touchdown drive there. And it looked like one of the ones was to Pat Freiermuth, kind of middle of the field. I think let's see what the alternate looked like, a Tampa 2 coverage in that with the linebacker carrying Freiermuth up the field on that, and good ball placement by Mitch Trubisky on that one. A couple of fine back shoulder throws. And just that drive, I thought Mitch Trubisky really needed in the preseason, and he got it. So once again, we talked throughout this thing. It seemed like Mitch Trubisky's job to lose during the preseason. I don't believe he lost it. And in fact, as you insinuated there, I thought it was his best showing of the preseason easily.
So you would agree, Trubisky, your week 1 starter?
Absolutely. And that's no disrespect to Kenny Pickett, who had a fan who literally, I thought, got better each and every game. And no, it's not disrespect to Pickett. It buys you more time with Pickett, and this is now Trubisky's job to lose however many weeks it takes.
Yeah, and it was really good to see him get that 2-minute drill as well. It doesn't always happen when you play a guy in the first half. I know Mike Tomlin sort of lamented, there were too many timeouts for Mitch, but they started that drive at their 6, I forget, whatever it was there. I mean, they were really backed up. So the yardage and the timeouts all to me kind of offset and wash out. And to lead that drive effectively, to push the ball vertically, to put the ball in the end zone, certainly it's felt like, and you can't do this the entire year, but Pittsburgh's played well with some tempo this year in some of those 2-minute situations. This team's really thrived, probably in part because of the way they practice it and rep it. That's not a new situation when they step inside a stadium, but certainly you felt like this team has done well with some tempo this summer.
Well, it was the ideal situation for him. I don't think you could have planned some of these things that I think there's, if you were to ask Mike Tomlin, boy, how do you think how these scenarios popped up for you? Because sometimes, you you don't get the necessary amount of offensive possessions and ball possession at a certain point in games to work on situational type things. I kind of think throughout this preseason thing, slate, that things have kind of dropped perfectly for the Steelers to put players in certain situations, most notably the quarterback position. And for him to go, I think it was 6 plays, 92 yards in a 2-minute drill, which he really needed to get knocked out. I felt during his, I thought it was ideal, and he handled it. He moved them down the field and put it into the end zone. And as we mentioned, 3 nice throws in there from Mitch as well too. So he needed that performance, and I thought it was above the line. And I think he's your week 1 starter.
Kenny Pickett was the backup, and he ran most of the second half. Mason Rudolph relieved him late in the fourth quarter. Again, Pickett was steady. He was fine. It was all the traits that he had shown in the first couple of games. It might have been a little less flashy. There were no touchdown drives in this one that Kenny Pickett led. What I like about what he's done, though, is just how consistent he's been. It's one thing for a quarterback to look good in one game. A lot of quarterbacks can look good in one game in the right scenario, under the right circumstances. For Pickett to do it 3 straight games as a rookie at this level, just to be the same dude, and again, showing that progression in some respects every single game, every single time we see him, is really impressive. Maybe the most impressive thing about him. He had the good back shoulder throw to Miles Boykin, so he did push the ball downfield a little bit more. But again, just consistently to be that guy every single week when you face different defenses, different structures, different challenges, home, road, et cetera, just to meet that challenge every single week for where he's at right now is super impressive.
At no point during the preseason with Kenny Pickett did he seem to be in over his head at all. He looked poised throughout the whole preseason, and I thought they did a good job of taking him and building on each performance there. And you talk, one of the main things I wanted to see out of him in this in this preseason game was more snaps. And he got more snaps than he did in the week 2 preseason game. And I really wanted to see him push the football down the field in this game, and he did. 9, I have it as his intended air yards in this game was 9.4 yards. Okay, nothing wrong with that number. The completed air yards number for him in this game was 6.1, and I believe that's his highest of the preseason. Now, there was a throw or 2 in there. I think 1 to Vaughn's. I thought Tyler Vaughn should have caught. That would have helped his completed air yard distance a little bit. And there might have been one other one in there that potentially could have been. Oh, the
Snead?
The Snead one. I mean, if that's anybody, if that's Deontay or Claypool, someone running that, it was a slot fade, I think. That ball's probably caught.
Yeah, I mean, Snead does not have a great catch radius overall, just slightly off. And so, just a missed opportunity there. The one, the Vaughn's, that was right sideline that Vaughn's kind of got pinned to the outside. Is that the one you're talking about?
I think so. I still thought he had you got guys in the NFL, wide receivers, and combated 50-50 balls like that you probably expect to make that catch.
Sure. No, I don't disagree. I'm just trying to reference what that play was to make sure that I knew which one you were talking about. But yeah, I think overall, Pickett's preseason numbers in terms of his yards per attempt was 7.2, which is not great, but that's a full yard, actually 1.1 yards better than Ben last year, and 7.2 would have been about average in the NFL this past season. So, it's not the check down Charlie that some people are trying to draw out of him. I have not seen that in Kenny Pickett really at all. Sometimes just, especially when you're in some of the 2-minute stuff he's been in this preseason, when teams are playing looser coverage and you're kind of forcing you to go underneath and drive the field, that's not going to always increase your yards per attempt. But I mean, he's been excellent.
Good with the RPOs, man. Really good. I thought his footwork was good in the game and has been all preseason. Once again, I think what we've seen with Kenny Pickett throughout the preseason is building off of each performance. And my biggest question going into this finale, I'd seen everything I wanted to see other than him pushing the football down the field, and I thought he did more of that in the game. So, I mean, I don't know what there is. He didn't turn the football over. Probably took a sack in one of those games. He probably wishes he would have had back on one of those fourth downs. But I mean, I don't think anybody can look at this preseason that Pickett has had and really find much wrong with it at all.
Right. And maybe at this point it'll be a little hot takey, but I still think he should start week 1.
Okay.
I think he's ready. Now, I'm fine with Trubisky's the starter. I expect Trubisky to be the starter. I understand it. I'm not going to gripe about it too much, but my stance last week was Pickett's ready. He's still ready this week. And so if I was Mike Tomlin personally, I would still start Kenny Pickett.
Okay. I would start Trubisky, but I mean, I wouldn't, throw anything or break anything if Pickett was named the starter. But I mean, I understand where you're coming from.
And then Mason Rudolph coming in late in that game, going over 3, one pass that was behind. I forget what the other 2 incompletions looked like. And so
the Jace Sternberger down the middle of the field that Jace probably should have had.
Okay, right. So limited action there for Mason Rudolph, but I think the way Pittsburgh handled the quarterback reps in this game was correct. Trubisky running the first half, Pickett most of the second half, and then Rudolph to finish things out. There's been I've heard some of the beat guys and local media members still try to imply and hint that Rudolph being potentially the number 2 to start the year, Pickett inactive. I just have a really tough time seeing that based on the reps and based on Pickett's play.
Yeah, and look, my gut still tells me.
We're back to that. Okay.
Yeah, my gut still tells me I don't know when it's going to happen, but my gut still tells me that Mason's going to get dealt. Now, is it by the trade deadline on November 1st? Is it part of this initial 53-man roster setting? I don't know, but it's been that way since the moment they drafted Oladokun. I still have this gut feeling that Mason's going to be out of Pittsburgh, not going to be in Pittsburgh throughout the entire 2022 season. I just don't know when it's going to happen.
For whatever it's worth, and I think it's a lot of potential just posturing, even if they're looking to make a deal. Omar Khan joining Bryant McFadden today and reiterating that he intends to keep all 3 quarterbacks that's on this team right now. So
what else would he say?
Well, I know. That's why I said it's some posturing, but certainly there's not even a hint at potentially anything. I lost my train of thought there. I think
there are a lot of teams that could use a quarterback. I tell you right now that could use a backup. But the team that they played, Sunday is one of them. In Detroit, the Rams. They had to throw that poor young quarterback to the Wolves or to the Bengals, so to speak, the other night because of they weren't going to play Stafford, and John Wolford lost his thumbnail on his throwing hand. And I listened to that post game conversation, and Sean McVay said that he could have played, but he was having to alter his arm delivery and yada yada that way. And I've watched enough of the Rams and Wolford during the preseason. Any team's in trouble if they don't have their starting quarterback, but the Rams are really going to be in trouble, I think, at their number 2 quarterback position. And especially with, there kind of being a couple of questions about Stafford. The Seahawks, Geno won that almost by kind of default, I think, in Seattle. We already mentioned Detroit, the Rams, the Panthers, and Sam Darnold's going to be out at a minimum 6 or 7 weeks with that ankle injury that he suffered. There's probably another team or 2 that you could throw in there on top of it. Now, I don't think they should just give Mason Rudolph away for a 6th or 7th round pick. I think he has more value to you on your roster than on somebody else's for just a 6th or 7th. But if we get into a 5th or higher, I think you really have to consider that.
Sure. I think the odds of him being traded have gone up now that it seems like he's going to be the number 3 quarterback in the inactive. Again, if he was the backup, the number 2, if Pickett didn't look as ready as he does right now, there was no chance they were going to trade Mason Rudolph. I think Pittsburgh will pick up the phone. They'll listen. They'll entertain offers. The question is, how much of a market will there be? How good will the offers be? Those are things I really cannot predict. There was a comment made this is via Evan Washburn, the sideline reporter, yesterday. I don't know if you heard it, Dave, that he had spoken to Mike Tomlin about a potential Mason Rudolph deal. And I'm paraphrasing a bit here, Tomlin's response of basically saying, if teams are calling, they better bring it with their offer. That was apparently what Tomlin told Evan Washburn.
True or false? Mason Rudolph will be on the Steelers after the 2022 trade deadline on November 1st.
True.
He'll be on the roster.
Yes, he will not be traded, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. You know which way I'm going. I'm going the opposite way. Who
says
you think we don't disagree enough on this?
Do you think he gets traded by, say, tomorrow at 4 p.m.? Because I think if he does get traded, like that's the most likely time for that to happen, less so in season.
It would help with the roster manipulation.
It would.
Potentially. Well, see, you're catching me in a weird situation, because if I go one way, then I have to change my whole 53-man roster prediction that way. I will say this: I have Mason Rudolph on the initial 53.
Okay, all right, fair enough. We'll see. So you think it's more likely he gets dealt during the season?
I'm just saying that I think Mason will be gone by the trade deadline. But push come to shove, my gut still tells me, and it's just, my gut tells me he will be gone by the Bengals game, week 1.
Okay, fair enough. There you go. We will see. I think we'll find out sooner than later what happens with Mason Rudolph in his future. I mean,
ideally, if a team was that hard pressed for a quarterback right now, they're going to trade for him right now.
Right, and that's because they want time
because they want 2 weeks to get him integrated in and that kind of thing, right? So, it's a higher probability that it would be now rather than later, but obviously quarterbacks can get hurt during the season, and a team could come calling, at any point in there. But I don't know what it is, Alex. It's just it has been this gut feeling from the moment they drafted, the second quarterback, that Mason's not long for this roster.
Yeah, I get it. I understand all the reasoning. And like I mentioned, I would be, if I was Pittsburgh, if I was Omar Khan, I'd be exploring a trade in a pretty meaningful way. But I think Pittsburgh's more content to hold on to him unless they just get a really good offer, which is probably at least a 5th-round pick.
I don't think Mason hurt is, Mason's value, if anything, increased this preseason. I don't think the 3 attempts that he had in that game against the Lions hurt any of that at all in there with the unities, especially that ball that I thought Jace Sternberger should have caught there. His trade value's never been higher than it is, I think, right now.
And I should mention that Ian Rappaport this weekend did include Mason Rudolph on the list of names of guys who is drawing some level of interest. So I think interest is there, but again, the question is it enough to convince Pittsburgh to move him?
Okay. Well, we'll obviously see, and especially look, if this team has some roster manipulation to get done on Tuesday by 4, that would certainly help in it.
It would, but it ultimately just comes down to what are teams offering? Is that good enough to justify the quote unquote risk of moving him?
Right. I'm not giving him away for a 6th or 7th. He has more value to me at $3 million, even as a number 3, than he does a 6th or 7th round pick. Someone's going to have to bring a 4th or a 5th to me, or like a 5th and a 7th or something like that,
Right. All right, let's talk running back again. Najee Harris playing 28 snaps, as you mentioned. Look, fine overall. He said he was not happy with his performance, but I trust he'll be good to go in week 1. Jaylen Warren getting some time. It feels like he's really cemented himself as as one of the backup running backs on this roster. Same with Benny Snell. Not too much to note in terms of their actual play, I don't think, in this one overall. But to me, I think your 3 running backs are going to be Harris, Warren, and Snell.
Boy, what did you think about that chip by Warren in that game? Did you see it?
I might have missed it actually. When was that?
Oh man, it was fifth drive, sixth drive, something like that.
Okay.
He helped over there. The TV, he just goes out of frame right after it happens, but he helped Chip over on that far side and put that pass rusher on his butt.
So the all-22 should give us a good view.
Oh yeah, you're going to get an excellent view. I think even Brian Baldinger has a clip of that up this morning there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he always gets the all-22 first. Yeah, Warren's, I mean, he's that kind of guy. He's competitive. He's fearless. He's been a never back down type of player this summer. Ever since the first backs on backers drill, he was as fearless as I've ever seen a running back in that drill, much less a rookie undrafted like him. So I think he's done enough. He has created some special teams value for himself as well. I think this is a guy with a really strong bet to make it.
I thought he did a good job on one of those runs to the perimeter of at least gaining the edge and getting, I don't know what it was, 4 yards on that. I thought Najee did enough to knock the rust off in that game. And obviously it wasn't an eventful game for the running backs overall, but I don't think Anthony McFarland did enough throughout this preseason, especially on special teams, to dislodge. It basically came down to probably a Benny Snell versus Anthony McFarland race, and Benny Snell just gives you too much in all areas. I think McFarland obviously probably the better speed guy, perimeter guy, out of the backfield type of guy, but I have a feeling it's just not going to be enough for McFarland. Benny Snell, core special teams guy, real hard run by two nice real hard runs by Benny Snell in that game as well too, to get through contact and get some good yardage.
And no pony at all this preseason. Saw it a bunch in camp every year. See it in camp. Never see it even in a preseason game. McFarland was healthy. Don't understand that, but it is what it is.
We have a file for that.
We do. We'll open it back up next summer.
Right.
All right, tight ends. Pat Frymouth again. I mean, he had that long catch and that 2-minute drill for 32 yards. He had 60 receptions last year, Dave. His longest reception as a rookie was 24 yards. So he's a 24-yarder last week. He's got a 32-yarder this week. I've mentioned before, talked about it throughout training camp. He's a guy this team will use more vertically down middle of the field, down the seams. He'll still be that trusted, sure-handed underneath guy, kind of the, continuing where he picked up where Juju Smith-Schuster left off, but they will use him downfield more. He will have a higher yards per catch than the paltry 8.3 he put up as a rookie.
And he needs to.
Yeah, and it's just good real estate to use, and he's a sure-handed guy. I mean, again, his catch rate based on his targets it's unbelievable. I mean, how when you throw that ball near 88, he comes down with it at a rate that you rarely see.
Right. He showed he can get down the field too. So that was good to see. But as part of that 2-minute drill, that's the kind of stuff that you need to see out of him.
Right. I think you will continue to see in moments this season. So that yards per catch are going to go up for Pat Frymouth. Anything else with the tight ends? Connor Hayward, I think he played a fair amount. I don't know if there was quite as much to discuss with Connor Hayward.
I think he did enough to make the roster. Special team can help you on special teams, can be that quasi H-back, detached tight end. You're not going to want to put him in too many situations where he has to be attached and handle a base defensive end, those kind of things there. But I think he did enough. He showed some really nice hands in a couple of these games, which is on his college tape, obviously there. So no complaints there.
Anything else with the tight ends? Kevin Rader, didn't see much of him. Jay Sternberger, as you said, late in that game, a potential would have been a nice snag deep downfield, but his hands to me have been suspect, I should say, and he had trouble hauling that one in.
Yeah, and I think as far as practice squad goes, unless you go outside the organization here, Rader's more of the kind of guy that you want because he can help you more on special teams than a Sternberger. Rader, a better blocker, obviously, as well, too. So we'll see if they can find somebody for the practice squad outside of the organization, but if they stay within, I would expect Rader to be the guy.
All right, moving to wide receiver, Deontay Johnson. So good to see him get work vertically. I had that big, long, I think 38-yard catch down the left sideline. Really nice throw and a great, falling, diving snag by Deontay Johnson in this one. Probably a little bit quieter for Pickens in terms of a receiver, but still a good summer for him overall. And just a really competitive room. Mike Tomlin saying after the game, there are some tough decisions to make in that receiver room with Miles Boykin, Steven Sims, ending camp strong overall. Olszewski get involved in the receiver run game, perimeter run game, and things like that. So it's probably this team's, offensively at least, their deepest room overall.
George Pickens might lead the Steelers in pancake blocks.
He's going to live in those cornerbacks' heads because now they're going to be waiting for it. They can't take a play off at all this year against George Pickens.
Yeah, I'd like to see him do some of these more notable corners, Baltimore and all like that, sit some of those guys. But yeah, look, that shows that stuff shows up. Look, it's like he's had one a week. It seems like
pretty much
of those. Sure, not the. Obviously had the good first preseason game. He is as advertised. So no complaints there. I think I thought Miles Boykin got better as a receiver as the preseason progressed as well too. And make no mistake about it, this is going to be one of your gunners. I mean, I think we're clear on that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I like to think so. I think he, the way he's able to get off press as a receiver translates in that gunner jammer relationship. And I think he can offer a bit on offense and certainly a lot on special teams. I know that salary's a bit higher, but it's, Pittsburgh can absorb it, no problem. So I think he should make this one pretty easily.
I think the biggest question in another area of the roster where you and I differ as far as maybe value goes is Steven Sims did everything that you ask of him, I think, during this preseason. You seem to value him a little bit more than I do.
Well, we'll talk about it when we go through our roster predictions. I think it's just basically based off of Austin's injury. If Austin wasn't hurt the way that he is, I think Sims' path really isn't there. But given the injury, with some of the things Sims can do in the receiver run game, and he has had a good summer, I think it may open that door.
Okay.
But receivers, again, just a quality deep room overall.
All right, Dave. I thought Vaughn's represented himself well, kind of overall there, and that's another guy I think is in good position for the practice squad.
Definitely, I think he's done basically all he can do to make the practice squad. And if this team wasn't as deep at receiver, then maybe we would talk about him trying to catch one of those last receiver spots on the 53. All right, Dave, the big one, the big elephant in the room, the focus really on this offensive line, the talk of the entire week. I know he got some pushback for it, but when James Daniels said he thought this unit took a step forward, I think that's an accurate comment. Now, granted, this team was so far behind the race to begin with that one step doesn't mean necessarily a whole lot, and this group has to be better than what they were yesterday. And, of course, I want to go back and watch the all 22 because that's the best way to evaluate the offensive line play overall. So I think there was some improvement, but there was still a lot to clean up and a long ways to go for this front five.
Well, as from what we've seen in 3 preseason games, I thought the starting unit was the best that they've been throughout the preseason. Now, however, they've got a lot of work to do. Dan Moore's a mess. Couple of penalties there. Seemed like Dotson, at least from the TV angle, played okay. As we joked last night in direct, Mason Cole looks like an all-pro compared to what Kendrick Green looked like at center last year. Now, does that mean Mason Cole's playing like an all-pro? No, I'm just using it in comparison sakes there. Daniels' play was better, I thought, of core 4 outside of maybe that hold that he got called for. I mean, you can't keep excusing these things, the penalties and all, but I thought on clean play, on the clean play selection overall, I thought this was the best the starting 5 has looked all preseason. But once again, there is plenty room for improvement.
Yeah, the penalties, the big elephant in the room. 4 in the first half on this offensive line, 2 on Dan Moore, both holding calls, 1 on Chukwuma Core for a holding call as well, and Kevin Dotson called for a false start at home, no less. So a lot of drive killers there that really negated plays and one reason why Pittsburgh had to settle for field goals and drives stalled out. So that's the most obvious thing is just how penalized this team was. It was also in an illegal formation penalty, which I don't know was right on the offensive line, a receiver not getting up on the line, correctly. But too many penalties in this game for sure. You can't have 4.5 and expect offensive success.
Right. You're especially with this offense right now, as fragile as it is, one holding call, one false start. I mean, it will stall this offense out.
Yeah, for sure. I thought just in my initial watch, I've not seen the all 22, have not really gone back and watched the offense yet, but I thought James Daniels did improve on some of those screenplays he got out in space. Mm-hmm. I think he was doing a better job just in terms of handling bull rushes and things like that. I think Dan Moore was using independent hands better, and his punches were a bit more effective, but still losing the edge too often.
Right. He's going to have problems with the speed rushers, I think.
Yeah. Kevin Dotson starting at left guard in this one. I think Kevin Dotson will be your week 1 starter at left guard, which is what we expected all along. It just has been a muddier and uglier battle than what it should have been. That puts Kendrick Green as a backup. And frankly, I'm not even sure what you do with him as a backup because he's not your backup center. J.C. Hassenauer is. He's never played right guard before. So he's really just your backup left guard. And I don't know what value that brings you.
How shocked would you be if Kendrick Green was just cut in favor of, say, John LeGlue?
At this point, I'm not that shocked. I still think Green makes it, but I could certainly see them because this team's going to still look to add post cutdowns, waiver wire, maybe a trade, something like that. And I think that's the most likely possibility for Green to get cut is he makes the initial 53, and then as his team adds some outside help, a guy like Green goes.
Would you bat an eye at it?
Not really, honestly. And that's so sad to say, but the play's been so poor. Again, what does he bring you? He's not even the versatile backup. I mean, of a BJ Finney, of a John LeGlue. He can only play left guard and he can't play that well. I mean, he can play center, but he's your number 3 center right now. Right. You don't want to play him. So how do you give this guy a hat? You're going to dress 7 offensive linemen, maybe 8 on game day. What is this guy going to bring you?
Right. Look, Green's going to be on my 53, but just because I just don't have enough gumption to make the move. It would not hurt my feelings if they did move on from him at this point. But, especially if they could get somebody from the outside, specifically. I thought LeGlue was at least on par with Green's play during the preseason there. But if anybody came with me with an argument for Kendrick Green to get cut, I wouldn't put up a very good counter argument against them.
Right. I don't think many people would at this point. So again, offensive line playing a lot in this game as they needed to. There was some improvement. The first drive, you get that pocket that collapsed. There was, you could probably call that more of a covered sack, but I still hate seeing that whole pocket collapse the way that it did on Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, I mean, the ball's got to come out quicker there in that situation, I think. It wasn't ideal because there was push, but the ball should have probably been out.
Yeah, I'm guessing it was pretty well defended. I think there were only 3 receivers in the pattern, but just didn't go right there. So again, was it as bad as last week? No, they probably weren't facing as fierce of a pass rush last week either. But again, I think Daniel's comment of taking a step forward is probably accurate, but this team still has to be a lot better. And the Bengals pass rush is pretty fierce to start with Sam Hubbard, with Trey Hendrickson, who had a great year last year in his first year with Cincinnati. So this group's really got to take multiple steps forward before week 1.
Right. And I don't want to really nitpick more on Kendrick Green, but the field goal block, have you got it? It'd be interesting to see that kind of slow down a little bit. It looked like that might be on Kendrick Green too. Yeah,
I know that. And someone pointed this out to me after. Liao does slip there. I don't know exactly how that works. Liao's had a heck of a time on the field goal protect team. He's been pushed down a lot this year, probably his first time getting reps there. It was to the outside of Green, the inside of Liao. Liao does slip, which probably didn't help, but there's at least a conversation about, in Green's vicinity about was that some part on him.
Right. All
right, let's look to the defensive line. First half, just the overall run defense. I mentioned this late on Friday's show. The last time Pittsburgh faced Detroit, the Lions put up 200 plus on the ground against them. The first half run defense was solid. The second half run defense, a lot less solid than that overall. But when the starters were in there, when Cam Hayward and Watt, those guys were in there, I thought they did a nice job defending the run, especially had that big 4th down stop, 4th and 1, where Miles Jack and Devin Bush fly in to blow that play up.
Yeah, that might have been one of the most uplifting things to see of that entire game when it came to the inside linebacker position was Devin Bush being in there on that key fourth and whatever it was stop along with Miles Jack there. So if this unit can stay healthy up front, I mean, I think they're going to have a shot overall. I mean, this is once again, Mike Tomlin said, get your cameras ready, because you want to see how that top unit did against the run. I thought they did okay overall there. I mean, this is a run defense that allowed the most explosive play runs in the NFL last season. And it was like second place was the Jets and like 6 behind them, So that's obviously an area that needs to get cleaned up. And if they can stay healthy, I think it will be cleaned up. I think the weakest link, obviously, of that group is Devin Bush. And I think he'll start. But I think the leash will be short with him.
Yeah. In terms of the defensive line, Larry Ogunjobi is starting this game as the base defensive end. I thought of him as more of a sub-package player, but maybe he'll be the starting lefty in week 1 against the Bengals, or Chris Wormley may rotate in. I don't know exactly how they're going to divvy up those reps. Both those guys are going to play, but it was interesting to see Ogunjobi play a fair amount of snaps in base defense.
All right. Outside linebacker.
To me, the single most guy on the bubble in this game was Hamilcar Rashed Jr. Like, very much, if he plays well, he's going to play his way onto the roster. If not, then he's not going to make it in this game. Nothing on the stat sheet, 0 tackles, and only had 1 penalty, which extended the Lions' drive late in the game. A face mask on 4th down led to a touchdown. So to me, that was a bubble guy that probably played his way off the roster.
Okay. Well, then they're going to have to find somebody from the outside.
Yes, I think that's probably their best approach. It'll be Watt, Highsmith, Tuska, and then a number 4 of some unknown origin there.
My fear all along throughout this thing, broken record on this, is they need better depth at the outside linebacker position. Period. And I mean, Highsmith didn't even play a snap during the preseason. That's a little bit concerning, because you'd like to have him be able to knock the rust off some, So we'll see what they do on the outside there, but it remains offensive line and outside linebacker as the 2 positions this team is most likely to go get themselves help at during this next week.
Right. I just didn't see anyone behind Tuska that really played their way concretely onto the 53. I mentioned Delonte Scott, and he's had a strong, steady summer. But is it enough high level to be your number 3 or even a number 4? I don't think so. I think there are going to be better options that present themselves when it comes to the waiver wire.
Okay.
Again, off-ball linebacker, you mentioned, some improvement from Bush. Miles Jack looking strong. Mark Robinson, a big stick on kick coverage team, so that was really important for him to make some plays on special teams. Hadn't seen a lot of that through the first 2 games, so I like seeing that. And then Buddy Johnson, again, in my book on Buddy Johnson, is a good tackler, but not much else.
Yeah, I don't think Buddy did enough overall. I mean, I'm not saying that it's 100% confirmed that he's not making a roster, but if you got some roster manipulation to do, I'm not overly worried about Buddy Johnson getting claimed off waivers or anything like that, I don't think.
No, not a chance there. So I'd be unfortunate if he's cut second year guy, 4th round pick, but to me, he has not done enough to make it. And if Marcus Allen can be healthy for week 1, which I think he will be, then I think Buddy's expendable.
Right. Mark Robinson did more than enough to make this team.
He did. Again, there's work to be done there, sure. Maybe he overran things a little bit in this game, just overall coverages and route combinations, and a lot of things he just doesn't know yet. But the traits are there, the downhill ability, the physicality, potentially what he can do on special teams. Not a guy I'm trying to get rid of.
All right.
Let's see, a quarterback. I thought it was I thought Levi Wallace played well. I think Wallace had a bumpy start with some of the illnesses and missing practice, but whenever he kind of got on solid ground, I mean, his camp in his summer ended a lot better than how it started. So I thought he did a nice job both in coverage and run defense.
I do as well, too. And I thought Witherspoon answered the bell when it came to physicality during the preseason. The biggest fear I've had with him is him making those business decisions and the whole tackling thing overall. I thought he represented himself well throughout the preseason when it came to helping out on the edge and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I remember him coming out of Colorado. He was so allergic to contact, but it's not going to be his strength. He's not going to be a Joe Hayden or Steven Nelson type of tackler or run defender. But there's been more 1-2. There's been more just get the job done, and he's been more aggressive. And I've seen progression there, and it's to a point where it's serviceable. It's competent. It's not a liability. And for what he offers as a coverage guy, you can take that trade off of maybe the inconsistent tackling overall.
Only thing is, can Arthur Millette get himself back healthy and find a good, solid, productive role in this defense?
Yeah, it's a great question. That hamstring injuries take longer than anyone thinks to recover from. You've seen all the time that Marcus Allen has missed with that. Whenever he is available, Millette is, and he'll be an early down slot corner. If he's not available, then the way your nickel package will look is Witherspoon at left corner, Wallace right corner, Cam Sutton in the slot, Trey Nord as your dime defender. So that'll probably be the way they run things if Millette is not ready for week 1.
I thought Justin Lane made a valiant effort there in the preseason finale. A couple of nice sticks in that game. I just think they'll look at James Pierre as the better special teams player, and that will be that there.
Right, and the better cover guy and more just upside in general. Lane carved out a niche. It wasn't what you wanted in a former 3rd round pick, but I think his time has run up.
Okay, I agree.
Safety, as we mentioned earlier, the Casey injury, the big news there. And then one guy talked about hopping on moving trains, Elijah Riley. He may be taking advantage of that opportunity there for Casey. I thought Riley played well at the end of that game. He's got some NFL experience, started 7 games for the Jets last year. Andy Weidel knows him from their days in Philadelphia together. So I think that's a guy that may be able to replace Casey, not to that level, maybe not, but a guy that's going to take that roster spot.
Look, this is a guy that Mike Tomlin might be able to use in future preseason training camps, saying, look, even the last guy in the door can make the roster. Riley likes contact. I think that's one thing that we knew going into the game, and I think we definitely learned in this game. I think you could do a lot with him too. I think he's very, very versatile on top of it there. So, and because of the Casey injury, and because of what's happening with Miles Killebrew, I think there's definitely a shot in. You could say, well, can you use roster manipulation, waive Riley, and then circle him back? I don't know. Riley could probably be the 53rd player on a couple of NFL teams right now, so maybe they wouldn't want to risk him to waivers. So I think this has become the ideal situation for Riley, and nobody should be shocked if Riley makes the initial 53.
Same, and he made some really good plays in coverage around the goal line. There was that touchdown that I guess was on him at the very end, but it was such a weird underhanded play. I think overall, for how new he is, Riley could do enough, again, because of that Casey injury. The safety situation is just weird because you got Casey. Killebrew, I don't even know what the heck's going on with Miles Killebrew. Maybe you have some sort of better idea about his status.
I know what you know right now, and I don't know. Is he healthy enough? Look, if he's healthy enough, I mean, he's a damn good special teams, and you're already, probably going to maybe part ways with Marcus Allen, and I mean, you talk about core special teams guys, and you got Watt banged up on top of it. I mean, if Killebrew's close, can you at least maybe suffer through him on the inactive list for the first couple of weeks or something like that?
Right. It's just weird. I mean, okay, so the timeline on Killebrew is day 1 of training camp, hurts his pec, doesn't practice for, I don't know, about 2 weeks, practices limited, then full, and then regresses, and then only goes limited, and then doesn't play in any preseason game. And then that's basically where we're at today. So he's been up and down in terms of his participation. And I don't know what that means in terms of, I mean, obviously he didn't tear his pec. Otherwise he would have been on IR. He wouldn't be in a situation right now. So I think it's probably a strain that's just been aggravating him and he's trying to work through it. What that means for his week 1 status, I couldn't tell you.
Right. Look, and as we said at the top of the show, there's a couple of guys there that make this thing really hard. That if healthy, they're on the 53-man roster. But with them being banged up, it makes you wonder. And because they're kind of being more role players, it does make it kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, it makes for some interesting decisions there.
Yeah, it does. So, I mean, any outcome with Killebrew would not surprise me. If he goes on IR to return, would not surprise me. If he's cut, that would not shock me at this point. If he just makes it and he's maybe inactive for week 1 or even healthy for week 1, again, none of that would surprise me at this point.
Right. I agree. I mean, I have him on my 53, but it's just because I don't know the medical outlook on him.
Saying that's certainly one name to watch there. Special teams, Chris Boswell, 4 for 5. Probably going to see a lot of Chris Boswell 5+ field goals this year. The one miss was the block there, which obviously would not put on him. Boswell connecting from 54. Tom Mead in his famous 10 takes yesterday, he noted maybe a bit of a draw on Boswell's kicks. A lot of kicks hooking left. So there's something to watch for the regular season.
Right. That was one of the best reads of the week by Tom Mead.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So Harvin did fine. I don't think his in-game performances, the safety punt aside, weren't spectacular, but they were more consistent. They were better and good enough to earn the week 1 job. Let's see. In terms of the return game, Steven Sims, good old Olszewski getting punt return work. Olszewski, the first punt. Sims, I think, replaced him the rest of the way there. Probably not much else to note in terms of special teams.
No, I think that about covers it overall there. Yeah.
There was the Robinson big stick on that kickoff, but I mentioned that earlier. So that's a good recap of the game there. I think it's probably important now to transition because the next 24, 48 hours are going to be incredibly busy. The cut down date, Tuesday by 4 p.m. Eastern time. Pittsburgh generally waits, but again, with a new GM and Omar Khan, things may be moving a bit quicker, so we'll have to wait and see. I know there's been some cuts already announced. I think the fact the Steelers played a Sunday game as opposed to some teams playing Saturday probably puts them waiting on cut downs a bit more as they go through the tape and evaluate injuries and things like that. So it'll be busy, though. Again, tomorrow, 4 p.m., the deadline to go from 80 to 53.
All right. I guess that means 53-man time, huh?
Yep, and I have not looked at yours. I'm going to go blind in this one. So off the bat, mine's going to be weird. I think you have to do it weird. This is, for me, I'm predicting the initial 53 in terms of what it will look like at 4 p.m. Tuesday. And then I have some caveats about where I think it goes from there. But that's the way that I'm proceeding with my prediction.
Yeah, and within the notes, I'm putting who I think comes back and those kind of things. Okay. I mean, as well. But mine is also based on what the 4 o'clock on Tuesday is going to look like here.
All right, let's start with quarterback. I'm keeping 3 and Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, and Mason Rudolph. Are you keeping the same 3 there, Dave?
Yes, I am. Still no changes here. My gut tells me that Rudolph will be traded at some point by the trade deadline at the latest.
All right, I'll go the other way on that one. Running back, same 3, Najee Harris, Benny Snell, and Jalen Warren. Again, Warren to me has done everything you could ask for. The ball security's been good the last 2 games. He's carved out that role in special teams. He makes it over Anthony McFarland.
I'm chalk here. I mean, that's what I've had as well too, staying there, and I'm keeping Derek Watt as the fullback as well too, against probably a lot of pushback overall, but I foresee them keeping them. And once again, these 53 are what we think the team's going to do.
Right. That's my lens. What I think the team will do, not necessarily what I would do if I was pretend GM. It's been a weird summer for Watt. I thought he would have come back too by now with that shoulder. It's been multiple weeks for Derek Watt and that shoulder. So hopefully he's good for week 1.
Right.
Tight end, I think the start things are pretty chalk. I have 3, Frymuth, Gentry, and Hayward. I believe that's your 3 as well.
That's my
so
3.
Not a lot of changes there. It gets interesting for me when I start talking about wide receiver. And I put 7. I know that most people are going to be really surprised by that. I'm going to guess, and this is kind of a 50-50 shot, that Calvin Austin gets placed on IR to start the year, which means he has to make the 53 initially. So ultimately I have this team really keeping 6, but 7 initially to make that move with Austin. So I have them keeping Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, George Pickens, Austin, Miles Boykin, Gunnar Olszewski, and Steven Sims as that number 7, my 53rd player on the roster.
Yeah, this is one of the areas we're going to differ on here. I couldn't make myself keep 7 and with Sims. I'm not totally convinced Calvin Austin has to go to IR. I'm more convinced maybe he'll be a week 1 because you still got to have inactives as many as 5 to 7, depending on elevations and all like that. I'm going to bet that they can work around this Calvin Austin injury for a little bit there. So I have the same 6 that I've had them keeping for a while now. Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, George Pickens, Calvin Austin III, Miles Boykin, and Gunnar Olszewski. I have Sims possibly making it back to the practice squad.
All right, fair enough. And I get that. And with Austin, I mean, it's certainly possible that he's just inactive to start the year, but for a guy that's missed this amount of time, has not shown any signs of him being close to even returning to practice in any sort of capacity that I'm aware of. And just being a young guy that's missed so much time, maybe use the first month just to work his way back. You're not rushing him. And then what Sims can offer in terms of the receiver run game, he has played well enough to make this roster. They do like him. He's dangerous in open grass. You talk about the perimeter runs his team wants to use, and they effectively have used throughout training camp and the preseason. I think Sims could be an asset there to start the season.
All right, you obviously have 7 initially, and then by week 1 going down to 6, right?
Correct. This is proceeding under the thought that Austin goes to IR. If Austin does not go to IR, then I would not keep Steven Sims. I would keep the 6.
All right. Now, even let's assume Austin goes to IR, and then your 6 includes Sims. Are all 6 dressing in week 1?
Yeah, it's a good question. I did not project an inactive list. It would depend partially on injuries, and that's a whole nother guess there. Probably not. So I get your point, but maybe during week 2, Sims becomes active for whatever reason, and there's an injury elsewhere. He gets a hat, and that's going to create value for him there.
That's my biggest pushback there with the Sims thing. I understand your line of thinking. I couldn't pull the trigger on that.
Again, my thought was if you make the rosters chalk, it's never right. I look back last year, initially at 4 p.m. last year, they kept 8 defensive linemen. I forgot they kept 8 defensive linemen. They kept 8 offensive linemen, 8 DBs, and then they kind of changed things from there and made it look a little bit more conventional. But I think you have to go weird at some position groups to have a shot at being right.
I get it. At least we're not going to have the same thing here.
Yeah, I think we're going to be pretty different here. Offensive linemen, go just all the offensive linemen here. I'm keeping 8 and Dan Moore, Chukwuma Okorafor, Joe Haig, Kevin Dotson, James Daniels, Kendrick Green, Mason Cole, and J.C. Hostenauer. I think Trent Scott's a perfect go-around player, the way that Millette and Finney and Coward were last year, a guy that could come back after the IR moves are made.
Yeah, I went the same 8 here, and I think also that Trent Scott, and we talked about this on a previous show, how trying to find that perfect vested guy that doesn't have to clear waivers, that you could give the wink to. I think in Trent Scott's association with Pat Meyer, probably not wanting to get too far away from him. On top of it there, it makes it the perfect scenario here to be at least one. You got to get Casey to IR. That this opens up a roster spot to do that. So I have them 8: Okorafor, Dan Moore, James Daniels, Mason Cole, Kevin Dotson, Kendrick Green, Joe Haig, J.C. Hostenauer, with Trent Scott circling back after the 53 is set.
All right, good deal. But this is an unsettled group. They certainly could and really should look for outside help.
Sure.
I think these 8 would probably not be the 8 that would go to week 1. There's going to be maybe additions, subtractions. Joe Haig, what's happening there? Concussion. Scott's eaten to his playing time a little bit. Is Joe Haig even completely safe? Kendrick Green, as I mentioned, what value does he have as a backup? Not much, in my opinion. So again, this is just the initial 8, 24 hours from now, essentially.
Right. I'm with you.
All right, defensive line, still keeping the same 7, and Hayward, Wormley, Lattimore, Leal, Ogunjobi, Alualu, and Adams. I know Adams in an ankle. Don't know what that is. I'd like to think it won't require him to go to IR. That's a name to watch out for. Same with Lattimore, but I think Lattimore would be healthy enough for week 1, or potentially a healthy or an active guy. That they need to have some inactives with 7 defensive linemen. So those are names to watch there, but I think those will be the 7.
Yeah, those are my same 7 as well, too, with Look, they normally only dress 5, right? So even if Loudermilk and Adams maybe are a couple of weeks away, you could get away with dressing DeMarvin Leal out as shoot and have Loudermilk and Montravius Adams as inactive. It would not. We just don't know how serious the injuries are with Loudermilk and Adams. I would think they would want to keep both those guys on at least the initial 53, even if one or both had to go to IR.
Right. Yeah, I don't think they're going to go straight to IR. So even if there is an IR situation, both those guys would have to make it. So it really makes it moot whether or not it's an IR situation for either of those guys, which I don't think it is. All right, Dave, let's go to outside linebacker. We differ here by 1. I'm only carrying 3 again on the initial 53, 4 p.m. tomorrow with Watt, Highsmith, and Tuska. They will need to add a 4th. They would add a 4th later. You have the 4th there with Watt, Highsmith, Tuska, and Rashid Jr.
Yeah, I had to keep. I made myself keep 4 here, and then hope maybe something happens where they add from the outside there. So I think they keep these 4 initially, but could maybe make a move after the 53 is set.
Right, I think they will, but I don't think Rashid has done enough to warrant that spot. And I think they'll just look to add after and not carry him initially.
All right. And that's one of my changes from my previous. I have 2 new players on this 53 that are different than my previous 53. And Hamilcar Rashid basically takes the spot of Jannard Avery, who was cut last week.
Inside linebacker, we're in agreement here, keeping 4 and Miles Jack, Devin Bush, Robert Spillane, and Mark Robinson. I think Allen, as we mentioned earlier, could be that go-around type player that will come back to the roster. I know that he is would have to go through waivers, and that's generally an unusual course to take, but I don't think anyone's going to claim Marcus Allen, and that makes him a more practical turnaround player if guys like Austin, Casey, or others have to go to IR.
Yeah, and it comes into I struggle with I worry too much about the CBA legalities.
Yeah, I don't think he's not gonna sue over that.
A grievance or something like that. But the way after thinking and drawing this thing out, and look, nobody's going to claim Marcus Allen on waivers. At least I don't think they are at this point here. So he clears waivers. My thought maybe is you get him to the practice squad, and then, if ready, he could be an elevation guy and help you out weekly that way.
Yeah, it's not a bad thought. I mean, I could see that.
But I do have him off this roster, even if they have to waive him without an injury designation and risk a grievance or whatnot. He's never got on the field, and outside of him being an up back and at $2.54 million, it's just not worth the roster spot as this team sits right now.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Again, I think he could come back. There is value there, but just initially to get that 53 again, would he get claimed at 26 years old, backup linebacker, making $2.5 million? Someone wants to claim him, more power to him, but I don't think that's going to happen. You could bring Allen back for half his salary, clear some cap space that way, and get him on the roster later this week.
Right.
All right, quarterbacks, I'm keeping 5 with Sutton, Witherspoon, Wallace, Pierre, and Millette. Again, Millette with that hamstring injury, something to watch. I don't think it'll require a stay on IR. He may have to be inactive week 1, not quite sure there, but I think these 5 are pretty cemented.
That's my 5 as well, too, and has been my 5.
And we're different. We've each made changes to our safety group, but we're the same at the safety group with 6, which, again, initially heavy. Fitzpatrick, Edmonds, Norwood, Casey, Killebrew. We both have Elijah Riley making this team at the 11th hour, with Casey being an IR to return player. And that's why he's initially kept.
Right. And we talked about Riley early in the show. I'm betting on them wanting KZ back later in the season. So, of course, he needs to be on the 53. I'm not so sure you want to expose Elijah Riley to waivers. Maybe the bigger question in there is Miles Killebrew, which we talked about. He could be the fly in the ointment here, depending on what you want to do here.
Agreed. I have no idea what Killebrew's status is. Nothing would surprise me about him right now, but I will put him on the 53 to start. So
Me
specialists, Boswell, Harvin, and Christian Kuntz, the long snapper. That's about as chalk as this roster gets for the both of us. So with the way that I mapped this thing out was I'm predicting 2 guys going to IR to return, not straight IR, but IR with a potential to return, which again means they have to initially make the 53 in Calvin Austin and Demonte Casey. I'm very confident Casey will be one of those guys. The question will be, will there be a second or a third, and who those guys might be? And so in the turnaround, the guys that will come back and effectively be on the roster later this week, I have Trent Scott, the tackle, and Marcus Allen, the inside linebacker. So again, that's why the roster looks initially heavy, but I think after the IR stuff moves are all cleared up, they'd have 5 safeties, they'd have 6 receivers, they'd have 5 inside linebackers, they'd have 9 offensive linemen. It would look a bit more conventional, but typically with this to return ability, which is relatively new in the NFL, the initial rosters look pretty weird.
I have just one player going to IR designated to potential designated to return, and that would be, of course, Casey. And I have, as I explained, Trent Scott circling back next week there. So that's my attack of this.
And then that does not consider any other outside moves this team could and likely will make. Again, in my scenario, they would need a 4th outside linebacker. They'd look for offensive line help, etc. But I'm just basing it off of where they're at internally by 4 p.m. tomorrow.
All right. Mine's based on the same thing.
All right. So that's our predictions there.
Practice squad. Look, all these, I know for a fact they're not all going to be right because we've seen this team constantly go to the outside in previous years. I have Oladokun, Kevin Rader, Adrian Ely, Anthony McFarland Jr., John LeGlue, Tyler Vaughn, Steven Sims, William Dunkel, James Valters, Buddy Johnson, Delonte Scott, Henry Mondeau, Chris Steele, Marcus Allen, Justin Lane, and Carlos Davis. I will guarantee you that will not be the 16-man initial practice squad, but I wanted to use all in-house players here because, I mean, just leaving it blank and saying outsider, is just too gray.
Yeah, I didn't even go 16. I couldn't even get 16 on there. I have 11 in Rader, Vaughns, White, LeGlue, Dunkel, Ely, Davis, Mondeau, Scott, Buddy Johnson, and Chris Steele. I would have put even a Platel on there, but he's going to IR, I think, or right injured, so can't even consider him right now. So there will be, I think, a lot of movement, a lot of outsiders being added to this practice squad.
Right, and probably some offensive linemen, maybe,
Yeah, this offensive line room will look, there'll be a lot of, hey, who are you in that offensive line room, I think, come later this week.
I agree.
All right, Dave, where to from here? I think that covers the bulk of it. I did mention in an article this morning, 5 offensive linemen that I think could interest Pittsburgh when cutdowns do happen, guys that are on the bubble, maybe a potential trade candidate in there as well. I want to run through that list really briefly. And I try to do a lot of Pat Meyer connections. I like to kind of be able to dot connect. And again, given the adjustment this team is struggling to make to Pat Meyer's system, the Steelers may want to add somebody who has experience in that system, the way that Trent Scott may have increased value to them because he is so familiar with Pat Meyer. So the top name on my list is Greg Van Roten, the guard, center, journeyman in Buffalo right now. He's never been coached by Pat Meyer, but Aaron Kromer in Buffalo runs a very, very similar offensive line scheme and system and philosophy to Pat Meyer. And so Roten on the bubble in Buffalo, he's versatile, could play anything on the interior. I think he might make the most sense in terms of guys who may get cut.
Okay. And who else is on the list?
Cam Irving, everyone's favorite. Cam Irving, the failed former Browns, but he's actually been able to carve out a decent career as a swing tackle. Just, been after that really tough start in Cleveland. He worked with Pat Meyer last year in Carolina, started 9 games for them, and he's in the bubble right now. Michael Schofield with Chicago, who's a pretty low-level lineman, but versatile. Again, worked with Meyer in LA. Dan Feeney from the Jets. He may make the roster in New York, but he's a guy that's played center, played guard. He's big. He's got good length. He's still just 28. Was drafted by and coached by Pat Meyer with the Chargers. And then this is not a cut down candidate, but a trade candidate. Andre Dilliad. We talked about him, I think, a little bit last week, I want to say. He's kind of a potential trade guy, pedigree guy, former first-round pick. The backup in Philadelphia. Andy Weidel was there when they drafted him over with the Eagles. If you want to mention maybe one trade candidate, I think Andre Dilliard could be that guy.
All right. Good job.
All right, Dave, any other thoughts here as we get into the really busy season in terms of just seeing how this roster gets formed? A lot happening these next couple of days.
Obviously, we'll be back Wednesday to talk about the initial 53 and start looking ahead to the season. Why don't we end with got a couple of emails in here.
All right, let's get to reader emails and close out today's show.
All right, from Chris Warren, he writes in, hey, guys, I have a couple questions for you. Do you think there's a possibility that Robinson and Bush could share snaps opposite of Jack? Robinson is already better at shedding blocks, and his reaction time is better than Bush's. Also, he says, while I appreciate Arthur Millett's experience and toughness, I still feel like he is the weak link in the secondary. There are no real running and passing downs these days. He says, to me, if Millett is on the field, I am an opposing OC, then it makes it a passing down. I'd rather have Casey on the field when healthy. What do you think? For starters, Casey's not healthy. And I think Millett, assuming that hamstring gets better in a hurry, I don't know what else you do there.
Yeah, I think to the first part of the question about the inside linebacker room, could Robinson see a role? Potentially. I don't think that would happen right away. They still like Spillane a lot. He's a more veteran guy, a guy that knows the system, has played a lot more football. So I think that's where they would start in terms of any sort of rotation there. But, could midseason, later in the season, could they work Robinson in? Maybe, but I'll take it one step at a time. Make sure he makes a team, which I'm pretty confident he will, but that's kind of the first step, and we'll go from there.
I think Robinson will play important snaps at some point during this year, just not sooner, but later.
Yeah, I think that's a fair take.
Let's see. Chris Warren had a follow-up on offense. Sorry, one more question. He says, isn't Zach Banner still a free agent? If he is healthy and the weight is under control, he is at least worth taking a look at. Right, he says. I couldn't tell you how that knee is with him and the weight. I sort of follow him on Instagram, but man, if he was healthy, and every team needs offensive line help, man. It's impossible to answer that question not knowing what his health is. So. And that makes it just really next to impossible to answer. At this point, it appears that maybe Zach Banner's on to his life's work, but things change.
Yeah, he's a guy that hasn't played football in how long? In basically 2 years. He played a little bit last year before that setback with the knee. He's not incredibly versatile. There's so many other options, guys who are on rosters right now, guys who've been playing all summer, guys that are healthy or healthier. I'd have no interest in bringing Banner back.
Bryce writes in a couple of questions. He says, I'm curious to get your thoughts on why we haven't seen more of the pistol formation in preseason with the offensive line in its current state and our quarterbacks bringing the skills they have. He says, I thought the pistol would be perfect for this offense, but we haven't seen much of it. Do you think we'll get a lot more of it come week 1 of the regular season? Number 2, as much as I'm all for giving guys opportunities to work their way out of bad play, he says, I think it's time for the front office to swallow their pride and cut Kendrick Green. He says, too many mistakes and not enough good play to keep him on the roster. He says, right now, LeGlue is a better player, and I never thought I would be saying that about LeGlue, but here we are. Do you agree or disagree, and why? Look, we said earlier in the show, look, if it was up to me, I would seriously consider parting ways with Kendrick Green and really probably waiving LeGlue as well, seeing what is out there, and then maybe using LeGlue as a potential fallback, add back to the roster, especially if I had to do heavy roster manipulation for guys to IR. Kendrick Green's been a mess. I just did not have the guts to pull the trigger on it, but I would not bat one single eye if Kendrick Green was waived on Tuesday by 4:00.
Right. And I think even more likely is the post cut down shuffle. If you add some offensive linemen, because you want to make sure that you have some backup guys before you start waiving some of your current guys. And if you, claim and add some other outsider that gets waived, and then, you have him that like claim's been processed, then you could release Kendrick Green. But again, to the point of, he's your backup. He's not going to start. We know he's not going to be your starting left guard week 1. what value does he bring you as a backup? And to me, not much. Not only just in the play, but where can he play? If you're number 3 center, he cannot play right guard. At least has not played right guard. I doubt it would go well if you pressed him in action and try to get him reps there in practice. He's a backup left guard only, and that's not value in the NFL.
Could that be the biggest surprise of the 53? Green out, LeGlue in?
I think some people would say it's not a surprise. Some people might be expecting it, but I get your point. It would be maybe the biggest storyline. Yeah.
We just don't have the balls to pull the trigger on it.
I mean, I thought about it, and obviously I didn't do it. But I mean, I'm trying to sound the alarm up. I think he would still make it initially until this team found some outside help. I mean, they're not going to carry like 5 offensive linemen on their initial 53. They're going to keep some backups just to protect themselves, and then explore from there.
I mean, LeGlue has played both guard spots, right?
And tackle. He played everything. Tackle. I mean, he's played everything, but I mean, he's played center as well. He basically can't play left tackle. That's about it. So would that shock me? No, it would not shock me.
Would you cut Kendrick Green?
Yes.
Yes, I would too. So why aren't we cutting him?
Well, it's just based off what I think the team will do, and the team might be a little hanger on there.
All right. What about the pistol? Did you see much pistol in camp?
Not once, and that's not a surprise. They did a lot that last year to try to compromise between Canada wanting to be under center, Ben wanting shotgun, the run play action without Ben actually having to crouch and get away from under center. That won't be the issue this year. They can run under center. They can run all that kind of stuff. So pistol was barely used last year, was used less than I thought it would be. They won't be used at all this year.
JJW writes in, hello, Dave and Alex. Great coverage. The best Steelers analysis. Thank you for that. 3 points. The offensive line is obviously incredibly bad. Last year, we were all saying that Dan Moore improved and would be the left tackle. What do you see in his technique that drastically changed from the end of last year to this year? I think the same cycle of events will happen. He sucked most of the year and then slightly improves, and we all hope for next year, and they don't address left tackle, and the cycle begins next year, he says. I feel bad for Mason Rudolph. The guy was sabotaged from the moment he entered the league when Big Ben wasn't friendly, and then just everything spiraled from there. He was just put in the worst circumstances to not succeed. He says, I love my Steelers, but I hope they trade him and he balls out in an inviting situation. Number 3, he says, I like Najee, but my goodness, wish we got Creed Humphreys. He's a good running back, but with our offensive line, his body literally has to use every muscle in his body to not lose yards. Nobody would succeed in this mess. We have no running game again, all capitals. I really hope that they do something with this offensive line. I think those are more comments than questions overall. And I feel you, JJW.
His first comment
on all 3 of them, I feel you.
He was asked about Dan Moore. Why does Dan Moore look different year 2? Or what did he say?
Yeah, he says, what do you see in his technique that's drastically changed from the end of last year to this year?
I still have to go through the all 22 of this Lions game, but it's just, Pat Meyer wants really aggressive sets. He wants guys that attack, guys that bring the fight to the pass rusher. He wants to work independent hands. He wants to, obviously he wants really, good first significant contact, which every offensive line coach I'm sure wants, but it is some of those teachings of more aggressive sets overall. Generally that requires guys to be stronger and be able to absorb maybe some power rushes and things like that. And that's not been necessarily Moore's greatest strength. And just a young guy, second-year guy that's adjusting to a new offensive line coach. And we say, it's 2 offensive line coaches in 2 years for him, but he had an offensive line coach in college as well that taught his own thing. So it's 3 offensive line coaches in 3 years. He had a senior year at Texas A&M. He had Adrian Clem last year, and then Chris Morgan as the interim head offensive line coach, and then Pat Meyer. So you have to think about him in college as well. He's learning something different and new every single year, and that's an adjustment, obviously.
Are you rooting for Mason to get traded as the fan part of you?
I mean, I guess I'm rooting for it.
Let me qualify it for a 5th or a 4th.
Yeah, I think it makes good business sense in terms of this guy will not be a Steeler next year, so get something for him as opposed to nothing. Or, I mean, the idea of a comp pick is pretty far-fetched, I think.
Are you rooting for Mason to get traded for a 4th or a 5th?
Yes, because I think, again, it makes the business sense, and I think it's just good for Mason. I'd love to see him get a chance somewhere. I think he deserves that opportunity. It won't be in Pittsburgh, so move on from him.
I concur.
All right. Anything else?
Yes, sir. We got from Sick Bubblegum. Hey, Dave and Alex, absolutely love the podcast. I've listened since the Todd days. Dave, your voice is fine. I love the pop culture references you drop. Alex, you speak very clearly and sound fine. Don't let the haters get to you. Keep up the fantastic job, guys. Best podcast bar none. We better end on that note right there. Look, we enjoy what we do. We just had, as I mentioned, we just had some fun, with the whole thing. We're not going to stop doing. I'll try to start speaking without stuttering, and Alex will start maybe smoking some Marlboro Reds or something.
I'm going to work on it this weekend. Yeah.
Some Pall Mall unfiltered, but you don't even know what those are.
Probably, no, I assume you can't even buy that, whatever old time.
Yeah.
You can?
Yeah. Pall Mall unfiltered cigarettes. Yeah.
Okay.
But we appreciate the email there. That's a great time to end, Alex, about, I don't know, hour, 40 minutes, right around in there, I'm guessing. So Alex and I will be back on Wednesday, talking about the initial 53, all the fallout from there, start moving forward toward the regular season, all that kind of stuff there. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot, follow Alex at Alex_Kozora, follow the show at Terrible Podcast, email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do, want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button, upper right navigation bar. Also, if you don't want an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button. All of our 53-man roster predictions should be on the site by, I don't know, about, it's going to take me, I don't know, a little bit, another hour or two to get everything all situated here. But anyway, please read our work on SteelersDepot.com. A lot of good stuff coming. The All 22 dropping, we think, later on today as well, too. And we plan on keeping you entertained. Thank you, everyone who has supported this site and podcast throughout the off season and the preseason. We're just blown away at the traffic and the listenership, and you people listening are why we do this, and we appreciate all of our great contributors on the site as well too, for a great off season that is now coming to an end here. So with that, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.